Magic Treehouse, Book Number 15, Viking Ship and Sunrise, by Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 1, Before Dawn. Jack opened his eyes. A thin gray light came through his window. His clock read 5 a.m. All was quiet. Today we're going to ancient Ireland, he thought, back more than 1,000 years. Morgan Le Fay has told him that it was the very dangerous time, with the Viking raiding their coast. "You wait," came the whisper. Annie stood in his doorway. She was dressed and ready to go. "Yeah, meet you outside," said Jack as he climbed out of bed. He pulled on his jeans, t-shirt, and sneakers. He put his secret library card into his backpack with his notebook and pencil. Then he hurried downstairs. Annie was waiting for him in their yard. The air was damp and musty. "Ready?" she asked. Jack took a deep breath. "I guess," he said. He was a little worried about the Vikings. They walked silently over the dark grass. Then they ran up the streets and into the Black Creek woods. Mist clung to the trees as they walked through the dark woods. "It's hard to see," said Jack. "Where is the treehouse?" asked Annie. "I have no idea," said Jack. Just then something fell in front of them. "Watch out!" shouted Jack. He covered his head. "A ladder!" cried Annie. Jack opened his eyes. The rope ladder from the magic treehouse dangled in front of them. Jack looked up. The treehouse was hidden in the mist. "Come on, let's go," said Annie. She grabbed the ladder and started up. Jack followed. They climbed through the wet air and into the treehouse. "Hello," said Morgan. "I'm glad to see you." She was sitting in the corner. At her feet were the scrolls they brought back from the Romans' time and the bamboo book from ancient China. "I'm so glad to see you," said Jack. "Me too," said Annie. "It's good that both you came early," said Morgan. She reached into the fold of her robe and pulled out a piece of paper. "Here's the ancient story you must find today," she said. Morgan handed the paper to Jack. On it were the words "Serpent's Magnet." The mysterious writing reminded Jack of the writing from their trip to the Roman town of Pompeii. "It looks like a Latin," he said. "Very good," said Morgan. "It is Latin. But I thought they spoke Latin in ancient Rome," said Annie. "Aren't we going to Ireland?" "You are," said Morgan. "But during the Dark Age in Europe, ecstatic people wrote in Latin." "The Dark Age?" said Jack. "Yes," said Morgan. "The time after the fall of the Roman Empire." "Where is it? Why is it called dark?" said Jack. "It was the difficult time," said Morgan. "People had to work very hard just to feed and clothe themselves. There was not a lot of time for playing, learning, or making art and music." Jack pulled out the book from her robe. "Your research," she said, handing it to Annie. The title read, "Ireland Long Ago." "Remember," said Morgan, "your research book will guide you, but in your darkest hour, only the ancient story can save us." Jack and Annie sat together. "And remember this," said Morgan. "It must be your darkest hour, when there is no hope left. If you ask for help too soon, it will not come." "And we have to find the story first," said Annie. "That is true," said Morgan. "Do you have your secret library cards?" Jack and Annie nodded. "Show them to the wiser person you met," said Morgan. "Don't worry," said Annie. "I think we're ready now." Annie pointed at the cover of the Ireland books. "I wish we could go there," she said. She gave Morgan a little wave. "See you soon." "Good luck," said Morgan. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. The Steep Climb. Jack opened his eyes. The light was still gray, but the air was even damper and colder than in Frog Creek. "Wow, I'm in the long dress," said Annie. "It's stretchy. Hey, I've got a little purse on my belt. It is my library card in it." Jack looked down at his own clothes. He was wearing the shirt and trousers made of heavy wool. He also wears leather slippers. In place of his backpack was a leather bag. "Wow," said Annie, looking out the window. "This is really look like a dark age." Jack looked out too. He couldn't see anything through the mist. "It's just because the sun's not up yet," he said. "I better check the book." Annie handed the Ireland books to Jack. He opened it and read aloud. "In the early Middle Age were once known as Dark Age, because learning and culture thoroughly vanished throughout Europe. Scholars today praise the brave Irish monk who helped keep Western cultivations alive." What do colonization and monk means?" asked Annie. "I think colonization is when people have books and art and good manners," said Jack. "Monks are ridiculous people who spend their time praying and reading and helping people." "Well, I don't see any colonizations or monk out there," said Annie, pointing at the mist. Jack pulled out his notebook. He read Brave monk in Ireland. Then he looked at Annie. Then he looked at Annie. "If we found civilizations, I think we found the lost story," he said. "Let's go," said Annie. She lifted up her skirt and climbed out the window. Jack read more in the Ireland book. The monk copied the ancient writing of Western world. Before printing was invented, all books had to be written and copied by hand. "Hey, we're on the cliff." Annie called from outside. "Above the ocean. Be careful," said Jack. He stuffed the Ireland book and his notebook into his leather bag. Then he climbed out the window. Annie was peering over the edge. Jack looked too. There was a rocky shore 20 feet below. Waves lapped against the rock. Seagulls stooped and glided above the sea. "It doesn't look like there's any civilizations down there," said Jack. "Maybe we should climb those," said Annie. She pointed to the steep step cut into the cliff. Jack looked up. The cliff also rose above them in the mist. "We better wait till the sun comes up," he said. "Let's just go super slow," said Annie. She started up the stone step. "Wait, Annie," said Jack. "They might be slippery." "Whoa," she said, almost falling backward. "I tripped on my darn dress." "I told you to wait," Jack said. "It's too dangerous." Just then, something fell from above. "Watch it," said Jack. He put his hand over his head. "Hey, it's the rope," said Annie. Jack saw the thick rope dangling down the stairs. "Where'd this come from?" he asked. "It's like when Morgans dropped the ladder to us," said Annie. "I bet someone's trying to help us." "Yeah, but who?" said Jack. "Let's find out," said Annie. She grabbed the rope. "I'll use it first. Once I'm at the top, you can come after me." "Okay, but hurry," he said, "and be very careful." Jack waited as Annie started climbing up the step. Annie held onto the rope as she climbed slowly down the stairs. Soon she vanished over the top of the cliff. "What's up there?" Jack shouted, but his voice was lost in sound of waves. He grabbed the rope and started up the steep steps. At the top of the hill, he pulled himself over the edge. "Wow!" boomed the deep, jolly voice. "It's another little invaders." Chapter 3 Brother Patrick. Jack's glasses were wet with mist. He quickly wiped them and looked up. The man in the brown robe stood before him. The man had a round red face. He was bald, except for the fringe of hair around his head. Nearby the rope was tied around the trees. I'm not an infidel, said Jack. He's Jack, said Annie. She was standing behind the man. I'm Annie. We're from Frog Creek, Pennsylvania. We come in peace, shimmered Jack. The man's blue eyes twinkled. Oh, do you know? He says. I wonder what's going on. I have dropped the rope so I could climb down the step, but you two grabbed it instead. How in the world do you get on this island? Jack stared at the man. He didn't know how to explain the magic treehouse. In our boat, Annie says quickly. The man looked puzzled. Not many boats can come ashore at this dark early hour. Well, we're very good sailors, said Annie. Oh, brother, thought Jack. He hoped their sailing skill wouldn't be tested. Where exactly are we? Asked Annie. And who exactly are you? You're on an island off the coast of Ireland, said the man says, and I'm the brother Patrick. Whose brothers are you? Said Annie. The monk smiled. The brothers means I'm the Christian monk. Oh, you're one of the monks who saved congratulations, said Annie. The man smiled again. Annie turned to Jack and whispered, Let's show him our card. I trust him. Okay, said Jack. He trusts the monk, too. They both pulled out their secret library card and showed them to Brother Patrick. The M and L for Master Librarian shine in the gray light. The monk stood at them and bowed his head. Welcome, my friend, he says. Thank you, said Jack and Annie. I did not truly think you're the invaders, said Brother Patrick. But on our small island, we're so careful of strangers. Why, said Annie. There are terrible stories about Viking raiders, he says. When we see their serpent ship, we must die or be taken as slaves. Serpent ships, said Jack. The prow of their ships are often curved into the shape of the serpent head, said Brother Patrick. I am afraid they stand for their fierce, cold-blooded way. Jack looked at the misty gray sea. Do not worry, said Brother Patrick. They cannot land safely on this island before daylight. They're not as good sailor as some people. He winked at Annie. Too bad for them, she says cheerfully. But tell me, why have you come here? Asked Brother Patrick. Oh, said Jack, I almost forgot. He pulled Morgan's paper from his leather bag. He showed the Latin word to the monk. Serpens magna. This is the title of stories that we have to take back to our friends and teachers. Morgan Lafay, said Annie. I see, said Brother Patrick. He gave Jack and Annie the mystery book. Look, what he thinking? What Jack wondered. But Monk glanced the subject. I think you would like to visit our monastery, he says. What's that? Said Annie. The place where we monk lived and worked, said Brother Patrick. Come. But the sun's not up yet, said Jack. Wouldn't the others be asleep? Oh no, said Brother Patrick. In the summer, we lie long for daylight. We have much to do, you see. The monk led them up to the dark path. Jack hoped their books was at the monastery. He wanted to leave the gloomy island with its thread of Viking images as soon as possible. The low bell started to ring. Jack saw the lonely church steeple against the gray sky ahead. Chapter 4 Books of Wonder. The monastery has a stone wall all around it. Brother Patrick took Jack and Danny through the gate. Beyond the gate was the small church on the hanging bear. There was also a viable garden and 6 stone huts shaped like giant beehives. We grow all our own food, said Brother Patrick. Carrot, turnip, spinach, wheat, and beans. He led them to the entrance of the first hut. Jack and Danny peeked inside. The monk was pulling flat bread from the low stone oven. "This is our bakery," Brother Patrick says. "It smells good," said Annie. "Come along," said Brother Patrick said. He pointed to each hut as they passed. "They are our sleeping quarters," he said, "and that's where we spin our clothes. In here we crumble our sandals. There we carve our wooden tools." In each of the hut, Jack and Danny could see Monk. They were busy spinning or carving. Finally, Brother Patrick came to the largest beehive-like hut. "I have saved the best for last," he says. "This is where we do our most important work." He stepped inside. Jack and Danny followed. The hut was warm and peaceful, yet very alive. It glowed with the golden light of many candles. Monks sat at wooden tables. Some were reading, others played chess. Best of all, some were writing and painting in books. "This is our library," said Brother Patrick. "Here we study math, history, and poetry. We play chess, and we make books." "Jack," said Annie, "I think this is it." "What?" said Jack. "Coordinations," said Annie. Brother Patrick laughed. "Yes, this is where constellations hide," he says. "On the top are lonely island in the sea." "Oh man," said Jack, "I love this place." "What kind of books do you make here?" asked Annie. "Books of wonder," said Brother Patrick. "We record Christian stories as well as old math of Ireland." "Math?" said Jack. "Yes," said Brother Patrick. "They were gathered from our storytellers, the old woman who sang the trail for long ago, when people believe in magic." "Wow," said Annie. "Come," said Brother Patrick. "Look at the books of Brother Michael's. He has worked on it his whole life." Brother Patrick led Jack and Danny over to the old monk. The monk was painting the blue borders around one of the pages in the book. "Michael, those 2 master librarians from far away would like to see your work," said Brother Patrick. The old monk looked up at Jack and Danny. His wrinkled face broke into a smile. "Welcome," said Brother Michael in a thin, shaky voice. "Hi," said Annie. Brother Michael showed them the cover of his book. It was decorated with gleaming red and blue jewels. Then he turned the page. It was covered with fancy writing and the left painting in green, gold, and blue. "I wish I could paint like that," said Annie. "It's beautiful," whispered Jack. "Thank you," said Brother Michael. "How do you make the book like this?" asked Annie. "I write on silkskins and use gold cold pen," said Brother Michael. "My paints are made of earth and plants." "Wow," said Annie. "Show Michael what you're silking," Brother Patrick says. "Oh, right," said Jack. He pulled out the paper Morgan has given them. He showed the Latin writing to the old monk. Brother Michael nodded. "Yes," he said with a smile. "I know that one quite well." Brother Michael turned the page. He had been painting with a blue bird. He pointed to the writing on the top of the page. "Oh man," he whispered. The words were Serpent Magnet. Chapter 5. Worship on the Wave. "We found our story," said Jack. "Yay," said Annie. "Indeed," said Brother Patrick. "But Alice, Brother Michael has not yet completed his work. You will have to return for it." "Oh, shoot," said Annie. Jack was disappointed too. "I don't know if we'll be able to come back," he says. "I don't know if we can even live without the story, said Annie. Brother Patrick looked puzzled. The two kids looked at each other, then back at Brother Patrick. It was too hard to explain about treehouse and how the magic worked. Jack shrugged. We'll just have a try, he says. Outside the church bell began ringing. It is time for our sunrise prayers, said Brother Patrick. Will you join us? Thanks, but we better try to go home now, said Jack. Brother Patrick nodded and led them into the garden. When he opened the gate, they stopped. The horizon glowed pink and purple. The sun has started to rise. No one spoke as the great fairy bell rose slowly over the ocean. Finally, Brother Patrick broke the silence. Shine, O lights of the sun, he said softly, on this day filled with wonder. That's beautiful, said Annie. Jack smiled. He agreed. Brother Patrick turned to them. This is such sight as it's that inspire our book making, he said. Now go. The may God be with you on your valued home. Thanks, said Jack and Danny. Do you need me guide you to your boat? He asked. I don't think so, said Jack. Follow the path to the top of the cliff, said Brother Patrick. Then use my rope to help you down the step. Okay, said Annie. Bye. And she went through the gate. Jack wanted to go home, but he hated leaving the monastery. It was filled with people doing his favorite thing, reading and learning. I really like it here, he said to Brother Patrick. I'm glad, but you must go now, while the weather is with you, said the monk. Everything can change in an instant. Then Brother Patrick turned and went into the church. Jack hurried out the gate. Before he went further, he stopped and pulled out his notebook. He quickly made 2 lists to make a book. Sheepskins, goose quills, paint. To make paint. Earth, plants. Come on, Annie called from the top of the step. Coming, Jack called. He put away his notebook and ran along the dark path to the edge of the cliff. Overhead, fork of gold circles in the purple sky. Their cries sounded like screams. What's wrong with them? Jack said. Maybe they always do this at sunrise, said Annie. Let me go first. Clutching the rope, she started down the step. Jack grabbed the rope and started down. The bird cry went on. They worried him. They sounded like warning. Jack reached the rocky lid and let go of the rope. Let's go, Annie called from the treehouse. Jack looked at the horizon one last time. His heart nearly stopped. The ship was outlined against the sky. Behind it, he saw 2 smaller boats. As the ship came into the view, their bright sails were filled with wind and their stern proved blazed in the new sunlight. Oh no, Jack whispered. Vikings! Chapter 6. The Vikings are coming. Annie, Jack cried. Vikings! Annie looked out the treehouse window. Vikings? They're headed straight for the island, said Jack. He turned back to the stone slab. Where are you going? Cried Annie. To warn the monks, said Jack. I'll come too, cried Annie. She scrambled out of the treehouse. Hurry, said Jack. Jack didn't even use the rope. He pulled himself up the step with his hands. As Jack and Annie climbed up the face of the cliff, clouds began to cover the sun. When they reached the top, the fog had almost hidden the servant ship. Run, cried Annie. The fog blanketed the whole island. Jack and Danny could barely see the path to the monastery. When they arrived at the gate, the musty white world was silent. Viking, Jack cried. Viking! The monks are still in the church, said Annie. She yanked the bell rop. Dang, dang! Jack and Danny watched as Brother Patrick and the other monk ran out of the church. The Vikings are coming! Jack shouted. Brother Patrick, Ruth's face turned white. Make haste, he said to the other monk. Gather the books and hide. The monk ran into the library. Brother Patrick turned to Jack and Danny. We have a secret hiding place, a cave on the other side of the island, he says. You can come with us, but I am not certain you'll be safe. Don't worry, said Jack. We're going to try to go home. Do not use the staff, Brother Patrick says. The Viking will climb them. Then how do we get down? Said Jack. Go that way, said Brother Patrick, pointing. At the cliff edge are two large rocks. A path between those rocks will take you down to the shores. When you then you can walk around your boats. Thanks, said Annie. Be careful, said Brother Patrick. He hurried inside the library. Wait, came the thin voice as Jack and Danny turned to run. It was Brother Michael. He hurried over to them, holding out his books and Irish tales. Take it, he says. Are you sure? Jack says. He knew it was Brother Michael's life work. Please, said Brother Michael. It's better that the world should have some of it than not at all. Just in case. Will you take care of it? Said Jack. Then he gently pulled the journal books into his leather bag. Good luck, said Annie. Annie and Jack waved goodbye to the old man. Then they reached the rock that Brother Patrick had told them about. Chapter 7. Fogbound. At the rock, the seagulls were screeched. Jack could barely see the steep path leading down into the fogs. Go slowly, Jack whispered to Annie as they started down. Whoops, said Annie. She slipped and fell forward, bumping into Jack. My foot got caught in my stupid dress. Shh, said Jack. He held on to Annie. They listened as pebbles and rocks rolled down the cliff. Jack took a deep breath. We have to watch out for Viking too, he whispered. Then they started down the thick path again. Then they went one step at a time. The sound of waves against the rock grew louder. Finally, they stepped down onto the flat strip of pebbles. Where are we? Whispered Annie. I don't know, said Jack. Oh, look, said Annie. She pointed to the shoreline. Through the fog rose the servant pole of the Viking ship. Jack and Danny crept closer to the ship. Their sails were down. Each ship has been tied to the tall Jack rock. They seemed desperate as they bumped into the shallow waves. Jack really wanted to check out the ship, but he was afraid of wasting time. We better find the treehouse, he said to Annie. They crept away from the free Viking ship. Suddenly they both froze. Through the mist, they saw the grove of Viking warriors. The Vikings were looking at the top of the cliff. Their long yellow hair hung down from beneath the iron helmet. They carried round wooden shields and sword and axe. It looked like they're planning to climb the cliff, whispered Annie. We have to hide until they go, whispered Jack. Then we can look for the treehouse. Let's hide in the ship, said Annie. Good idea, said Jack. They crept back to where the ships were tied. Jack was happy to see what side of the smallest ship were very low. They would easily be able to climb over them. You go first, said Annie. She waded through the shallow waters. It was cold. He reached the ship and grabbed one side. He pushed himself up onto the ship deck. The ship jerked forward. Jack looked at the shores. It was now 30 feet away. The ship's arching rope was pulled tight. The servant pole up and down with the wave. The fog and the movement of the ship made Jack feel as if he was in a dream. For the moment he forgot to be scared of the Vikings. "It is so cool," he called. "Come on, Annie." Annie started to wade out the ship. Suddenly he disappeared. "Annie," called Jack. Her head popped out of the water. He splashed with her arm. It's deep," she gasped. "My dress too heavy. Use the rope," called Jack. "Like when we climbed the stairs." Annie grabbed the rope that stretched from ship to shore. It held her weight as it began to inching along it. "Hold on tight," cried Jack. I am," gasped Annie. She kept going, hand over hand, along the rope toward the ship. When Annie got closer to the ship, Jack reached out to help her. As he pulled her in, the side of the ship dripped down. Then the rope went slack and Viking ship slid out to sea. Chapter 8. Lost at Sea. Annie fell to the dock of the ship. Jack pulled the rope out of the water. The end of it was still tied under a loop. "What happened?" asked Annie. "We're heading out to sea," said Jack. "I guess all the pulling lift and rope off the rock." Annie sat up and looked at the misty whiteness. "I can't see the island," she says. "I can't see anything," said Jack. Annie looked at Jack. "Do you think this is our darkest hour?" she asked. "I don't know," said Jack. "Maybe the book will help." He pulled out the research book. He found a picture of the Viking ship. He read the caption right aloud. "Viking warship were the best ship of their times. When there was no wind, the crew would take down the sails and row with oars. The smallest ships and four-wheelers, and the large has as many as 32. Rowers sat on the box that shares their belongings." "Great," said Annie, jumping up. "This isn't our darkest, it's ours." Why do you say that?" asked Jack. "There's still hope," said Annie. "We can row to the other side of the island and find a tree house." "Are you nuts?" said Jack. "Please, Jack," said Annie. "Can we just try?" She grabbed one of the oars. She could barely lift it. "Forget it, Annie," said Jack. "It takes 4 big Viking guys to row these things. You're too little. I'm too little." "Come on, Jack, just try," said Annie. "You got an oar too. We'll sit on the box across from each other's." "Oh, brother," said Jack. Annie dragged her long oar over to the sturdy box. "I'm not doing it alone," she says. Jack groaned. Then he dragged the oar to the box across from Annie. "Cool," said Annie. She peered into the storage box. "Look, one for each of us." She lifted out the 2 small Viking helmets. "Maybe those were made of Viking kids who sometimes ride in these ships," said Annie. "Maybe," said Jack. He hadn't thought of Vikings as real people before, people with families and their little kid. Annie pulled off her stirrup and pulled out the helmets on her heads. "Now I feel like Vikings too," she says. I bet it will help me row." She handed Jack a helmet. He put it on. It made him feel a little different. "I don't know about this," he says. The helmet wasn't as heavy as the one has worn in this time of castle, but it was still pretty heavy. "Well, I'm braver than with mine on," said Annie. Jack smiled. He didn't know how Annie could be braver than she always was. "Ready to row?" she asked. "Yeah," said Jack. He was feeling braver himself. The winds picked up as Jack lifted his heavy oars up under the side of the ship. He lowered it into the water, but the current was so strong that the oar was ripped from his hand. Jack fell over backward as his over or slip into the sea. I lost my oar, Annie yelled. Jack looked up as rain started to fall. The sky was black, and a gush of seawater poured over the side of the ship. Brr, said Annie as she tried to stand. The black sky shielded with thunders and flashed with lightning. Jack crawled to the side of the ship and pulled himself up. Another huge wave was coming right toward them. It's our darkest hour now, cried Annie. Get Brother Michael's book. He reached into the leather bag. He pulled out the yellow books and held it up. Save a story, he cried. He looked at the sea again. What he saw made him scream. Rising from the oncoming wave was the giant sea serpent. Chapter 9. Sea monster. The serpent had rose higher and higher above the water. Jack couldn't move. He's beautiful, said Annie. Beautiful? Cried Jack. The serpent's neck was as tall as the 2-story building. Its green curls were covered with sea slimes. Go away, shouted Jack. No, stay, help us, shouted Annie. The great serpent glided closer to the ship. Jack docked. Come on, said Annie. You can do it. Get us to shore before the ship sinks. Jack closed his eyes. He felt the ship jerk, then move forward. He looked up. They were gliding over the giant wave. Jack turned. The great serpent was pressing its long necks against the back of the ship, pushing it toward the shore. As the serpent pushed them, the wind grew calmer. The cloud lifts and water glittered with the sunlight. The rocky shore grew closer. Jack could see the tree house on the ledge above it. Hurry! Annie called to the serpent monster. The great serpents gave the ship a last long push. The ship swooshed onto the sandbar near the shore. Jack pulled the dark book carefully back into his bag. Then he and Danny climbed out of the ship onto the wet sand. They looked back at the sea. The giant great serpent was riding its long neck into the air. Its curls glitters pink and green in the sunlight. Bye, shouted Annie. Thank a lot. The monster seemed to nod at her. Then she dove into the sea and was gone. Jack and Annie handed toward the rock. All of a sudden, Annie gasped. Uh-oh, she said, pointing at the top of the cliff. 2 Vikings were staring down at them. To the treehouse, cried Jack. The Viking shouted and started down the step ladders. Jack and Danny began scrambling up the rock. They reached the treehouse and climbed inside. Jack grabbed the Pennsylvania book. Annie stuck her head out the window. Go home! Stop causing trouble! She yelled to the Vikings, who were almost at the ledge. Jack pointed to the picture of the Rock Creek woods. I wish we could go there, Jack shouted. Just as the Viking reached the ledge, the wind began to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 10. Sunrise. Boy, I'm glad to be back in my gym, said Annie. Jack opened his eyes. He felt them, but he was glad to be wearing his jeans again too. Welcome home, said Morgan. She was standing in the shadows. Are you all right? Of course, said Annie. And we brought back the lost book, said Jack. He reached into his backpack and pulled out the yellow book of Brother Michael. He handed it to Annie. The earthless sighed. She ran after, hands over the sparkling cover. The great work of art, she says. Morgan then put the books next to the scroll from Roman times and the bamboo book from the ancient China. I'm afraid the story you wanted is not all there, said Jack. Brother Michael didn't get a chance to finish it. Morgan nodded. I know, she says. Sadly, we have only bits and pieces of many wonderful old stories. What's the story about? Asked Danny. It's an ancient Irish tale about the great servant named Serfrid, said Morgan. He saved us by pushing our ship over the stormy wave, Annie said Annie. Servant was huge, ugly monster, said Jack. Morgan smiled. Sometimes monsters can be heroes, he says. What about Viking? Asked Jack. Most definitely, Vikings could be heroes too, she said. In fact, when the Vikings settled down, they became more than just the warrior people. They actually added the lots of constellation. We found constellation on our trip, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. In our library of many stories. Jack Morgan smiled again. The library was the light in the dark age, wasn't it? She said. Jack nodded. He thought of Brother Michael and the other monk making their beautiful book by candlelight. Thank you also for your great courage, Morgan says. We're both heroes too. Jack smiled shyly. Go home now and rest, said Morgan. Bye, Jack and Annie said together. They started down the treehouse ladder. The sea was turning pink and gold. The sky was turning pink and gold. When they reached the ground, Morgan's called out to them. Come back in 2 weeks. I need you to find one more lost book. Where is it? Asked Jack. Ancient Greece, said Morgan. A palace with a hidden crossland and the first Olympic game. Wow, said Annie. Jack was thrilled. He always wanted to go to the ancient Greece. Jack and Danny took off through the wood. The sun was rising when they got to their front porch. Annie opened the front door. She stuck her head inside and listened. Everything quiet, she whispered. I think Mom and Dad are still sleeping. She moved quietly inside. Jack turned back to watch the restaurant rise into the clear blue sky. He thought about how was it the same sun that has risen in Ireland over 1,000 years ago. Shine, oh, of light sun, Jack whispered, on this day filled with wonder. Then he slipped into his quiet house. Jack whispered, on this day filled with wonder.